Kia ora, and welcome to the Beer Jerk Beer of the Week drink along. I'm Luke, and today we're drinking a pale ale from Lakeman. This is Taupō Thunder, which is part of the Lakeman core range, and it is as I just said, a pale ale. You may have had some beers from Lakeman before. They do some pretty good stuff. They are, as you might expect, in Taupō, and it was started by a chap called James. So James Cooper has a farm, and on Cooper's farm they decided to open a brewery a few years ago, and all of the water for their beers comes from a bore that's on the farm. And there's a young chap called Rory who's the head brewer there, and they've just been quietly making some bloody excellent beers. I've been really impressed with some of the stuff from Lakeman just from the outset. Basically they our neighbours at the alarm company next door were quite excited a few weeks ago. They saw Lakeman on Country Calendar. So I think maybe they've gained a lot of new fans after that feature. I didn't watch the episode of Country Calendar, I probably should, so I can learn a little bit more about what they get up to. But yeah, they just do a bit of a range of beers, some nice hoppy stuff. I'm a big fan of their stouts. But this that we're drinking this week is their pale ale. You've probably had a pale ale before. Pale ale has been knocking around since the early 1700s. Pale ales first became possible in England with a development with the malting process. Beers in the olden days, and by olden days I'm meaning like 1600s and earlier, used to taste pretty different to how beers taste today. Yeast is a thing that we often talk about here at Beer Jerk, and Louis Pasteur isolating yeast, and in the olden days beers were just fermented naturally and wildly. The beers weren't really dosed with yeast. Yeast just fell in from the air. Yeast is all around us. So most beers you'd have drank would have just tasted kind of funky, like some of the Brettanomyces beers that you may have tried. But also the malt, the barley was malted using fire, and that would have been wood fire. So if you've had a smoky beer, a Rauch beer, so like a Schlenkerla perhaps, that's how a lot of beer would have tasted back in the olden days. But also developments in technology have changed everything, and especially in beer, which is an agricultural product, but also it's quite an industrial product, and it's changed through technologies. Anyway, so Coke got invented, which is kind of like a dense, smokeless coal. So you could suddenly warm up and malt your barley without imbuing your beer with smoke or with dark colour. So you end up with this lovely light coloured malt that meant you could have pale coloured beers, which caused real waves throughout all of Europe. So that's how lagers came to existence in Bavaria and in the Czech Republic, and how you got light coloured beers and pale ales in Belgium. So the first pale ales in England would have tasted pretty different to this because they were not as heavily hopped. And the hop varieties were quite different in England in the olden days. They'd have been much more sort of like earthy flavours, hedgerow flavours, fuggles that I talk about basically every week on the drink along. So those English pale ales sort of transmorphed into the pale ales that we know today via a long and tenuous route. They, in the 1800s, they were known as bitters, basically. So you've probably been to an old English pub and drank some bitter. So bitter is just the same as pale ale. They're just they're just interchangeable names for real ale style beers, bitter and pale ale. And then in the late 70s and the 80s, you had a few Americans that came to England, and they just fell in love with these bitters, these pale ales. And they went back home to California, to Oregon, and they made their own versions on these English pale ales. So Sierra Nevada were key amongst that, and a few of the major breweries that made big changes in the 80s and really kick-started, what we know of as our craft beer revolution, where it's this new world of beer away from these traditional Belgian styles, German styles, English real ales that people have brewed for centuries. And this very much fits squarely into the American pale ale style, like Sierra Nevada, like iconic beers like Fat Tire that you may have drank on your holidays. And it's a beer it's decidedly hop forward. It's got a real whack of bitterness to it. but also the beautiful aromas that come from these just interesting hops, these new world hops that were starting to be grown in the Yakima Valley in the States, and here in New Zealand with our own hop fields around the Nelson region. So this beer is pretty heavily hopped with Riwaka, which is a great aroma hop, and Mutere. So they are hops that are named after regions around Nelson, which is where our hops are grown mainly in New Zealand. You can grow hops anywhere in our country and in many places in the world really, but there are bands of the world where hops grow best. So in Europe you've got Kent, and you've got Styrian, you've got the the Czech Republic, these places where good hops are grown, through parts of France as well, and through to Yakima, Washington, the States. And in our southern hemisphere, you have southern Australia. You get some really good hops like Galaxy and Ella that are grown there. And here in New Zealand, it's mainly around Nelson. They get lots of sunshine. The conditions are just perfect. So Mutere is a place. Riwaka is a place. Recently, we're having new hops that are coming out. There was the I think it was just named the New Zealand Hops 102 that was just named. Joe, did they call it Super Fantastic, Superdelic? It was 105 and it's Superdelic. I'm glad I got my fact checker over there. So yeah, maybe they've just run out of cool place names and they're calling things just Austin Powers names with Superdelic. But Mutere is a fairly modern bittering hop. I think it just got released in around 2015. And it's a bit like SARS, I suppose. It's got some nice bittering characteristics. It's got some kind of grassy notes. But it's really Riwaka that's the real champion here. And Riwaka is what a lot of people think of when they think about New Zealand hops. You've got your good like tropical characteristics to it. It's got a real nice, there's kind of a bit of a dankness to it, a little bit of a weed aroma to it. You've got a bit of tropical fruits in there. But both of these hops work really nicely together in this beer. And this is part of Lakeman's core range, their Taupō Thunder. And it's a beer that you can just tell that Rory has just brewed again and again. And he's just really honed it in. It's a really excellent pale ale, which is the sort of style that I've really loved drinking. A beer that a brewer has sort of worked on again and again. A lot of us, well here at Beer Jerk, with our beer of the week, we never drink the same beer twice. We've been doing this for 8 years now. So we love seeing new seasonal, interesting beers come out of brewers. But yeah, we also really love drinking the sort of beer that a brewer has just perfected over time. Like those Germans that I keep coming back to that have been brewing the same beer for 1,000 years and they've really got it down. So bloody good beer. I know you're all going to enjoy this. You can't really go far wrong with just a fantastic New Zealand hop pale ale like this. It's great. It's a good work, Lakeman. And other news from Beer Jerk at the moment, we've just released the Sour Drop, which is a pretty great sour collection that Joe pulled together of just 12 different New Zealand brewers, a lot of fruit-based kettle sours in there. It's only $79. We just launched it this morning. We've shipped a bunch of them out of the door today, so we're shipping them every day. So if you are a sour fan, head to beerjerk.co.nz, grab yourself a box of that. And as ever, the Fridge and Flagon is open on Saturdays. So I'm working this Saturday, come get a beer. We've got a whole bunch of interesting stuff lined up on tap. And we're currently hiring a bartender. So if you want to come and work in our bar, drop me a message and maybe you could be our next bartender. Anyway, enough of me waffling on. Thanks for joining us. Cheers. See you next time.